3 hours of direct light. That is often the only requirement for survival. Why do growers categorize shaded zones as dead space? They equate low radiation with zero yield. In reality, this is a calculation error. Solar energy is the engine of agriculture, but not every engine requires full throttle. Shadows create a specific microclimate. 1 square meter of shade, that is enough space to secure a continuous vitamin supply. Chard is not a decorative element for the backyard. It is a biological engine designed for low-light environments. While other crops require 12 hours of direct sun to synthesize sugars, this species adapts. It slows its metabolism, but continues to convert weak photons into biomass. The plant acts like a perennial mechanism. It does not exhaust itself after one cycle. The harvest protocol is strictly mechanical. You do not uproot the plant. You sever the outer leaves with sharp shears. The central growth point remains untouched. The plant does not perceive this as an injury, but as a signal to regenerate. It immediately pushes fresh vegetative growth from the center outward. This system allows for a steady calorie stream over months. Why choose this variety for a survival garden? It tolerates neglect that would kill a standard crop. Upon closer inspection, the seed reveals a biological anomaly. To the naked eye, it resembles a single rough unit, but inside, it is a multi-germ cluster. One corky casing holds multiple distinct embryos. This is a natural survival strategy. In accelerated motion, the casing softens in damp soil. Within days, 2 or 3 stems erupt from a single point, competing for space. This density requires tactical intervention. The grower must thin the cluster. You remove the weak to support the strong. However, in high-yield systems, growing double stems is acceptable. The root systems adjust and share the available nutrients. Logistics are flexible. Direct sowing into cool soil works because the seed coat is tough. Alternatively, starts can be raised indoors under controlled conditions and moved to the field later. On the surface, the leaves look tender and vulnerable, but inside, the cellular structure is reinforced against cold snaps. The plant thrives in lower temperatures. The metabolic processes do not shut down when the thermometer drops. This prevents the bitter scorching common in summer heat. Then there is the chemistry of color. Betalain pigments saturate the stalks. You observe deep crimson, bright yellow, and sterile white. In a mixed bed, the saturation is intense. But this is not decoration. It is the visual indicator of nutrient density. The biomass is substantial. 1 kilogram of raw leaves cooks down, yet retains significant fiber and volume. It anchors the diet. The rhythm is established: cut, regenerate, repeat. Even a restricted container such as a fabric grow bag offers enough root space. The plant efficiently mines the soil for nitrogen, but for some, the priority is velocity. If chard is the endurance runner, the next crop is the sprinter. Lettuce offers the fastest path to harvest. 35 days. That is the targeted lifespan for a high-efficiency leaf lettuce crop. Why force a plant into the shadows? Indirect solar exposure, heat triggers bitterness and rapid flowering. In the shade, the biological clock slows down, preserving the edible tissue. Leaf lettuce acts as the tactical solution for low-light agricultural zones. While full sun drives explosive energy production, it also brings thermal stress. In partial shade, the plant's metabolism drops a notch. It does not stop. It adapts. The growth curve flattens slightly, but the risk of crop failure decreases. To maintain a steady output volume, variety selection becomes critical. Ignore the slow-maturing cultivars that require 55 days or more. Focus on genetic variants engineered for speed. Look for maturity windows between 35 and 45 days. This tight time frame ensures a rapid turnover cycle. But there is a logistical bottleneck here. Direct sowing in shaded soil is inefficient. The ground temperature is lower. The photon count is reduced. Seeds placed directly into this environment often remain dormant or sprout with weak, leggy stems. This creates a gap in production. In fast motion, the seed sits inert in the cool soil. struggling to breach the surface, wasting valuable growing time. The strategy requires a shift in protocol. Do not sow, transplant. Start the biological units in a controlled, high-light nursery environment. Allow the root systems to establish structural integrity. Once the plant is sturdy, move it into the shaded bed. This bypasses the vulnerable germination phase entirely. The lettuce enters the low-light zone ready to consume nutrients rather than waiting on a hesitant sprout to emerge. It is the same square footage, but the timeline is optimized. On the surface, shade appears to be a limitation, but inside the plant's hydration system, it is a survival asset. Lettuce relies on a shallow, fragile root network. It cannot dig deep for water. Direct sun evaporates surface moisture rapidly, causing the leaves to wilt and scorch. Shade acts as a thermal buffer. It maintains a consistent soil moisture level. The leaves do not burn. They remain pliable, holding maximum water content. This environment prevents the cellular structure from becoming fibrous. The texture remains crisp. Once the root system settles, the extraction process begins. This is not a single harvest event. It is a continuous yield. Cut the outer leaves first. Leave the central rosette intact. The plant detects the loss of biomass and accelerates growth from the center to compensate. Move down the row, harvesting section by section. By the time you reach the end, the first plants have already rebounded. Close up, the cut stem creates a seal while fresh, pale green shoots push up from the center of the plant. Diversify the planting layout. Do not rely on a single strain. Integrate oak leaf, loose romaine types, and frilly greens in parallel rows. Different geometries catch light differently. This ensures that every collection cycle yields a mix of textures. Can you scatter seed directly into the dark soil? Technically, yes, but the data predicts a slower takeoff. Germination will be sporadic. Early foliage will be sparse. If consistent output is the goal, transplants are the only logical path. Keep the substrate lightly moist. Prevent the soil from baking hard during rare heat spikes. The mechanism works. A shaded patch transforms from wasted space into a functional food source. Fast, resilient, and consistent. Dinner is secured. Two underrated species. They thrive where fragile crops fail. Why dedicate valuable soil to bitter greens? Because they turned low-light dead zones into productive caloric units. Endive and escarole are the twin bill of the shade garden. Visually, they are distinct. Upon closer inspection, the leaves are rigid and architectural. They do not wilt easily. In a mixed salad, they provide structural integrity that soft lettuce lacks. The flavor is not sweet. It is sharp. A chemical bite that signals high nutrient density. Most vegetables demand full solar saturation. These varieties are different. They utilize partial shade as a resource. An area receiving only 4 or 5 hours of light becomes a viable production site. This maximizes the efficiency of the entire garden footprint. But there is a biological hurdle. The challenge lies in the germination phase. The seed resembles a tiny tan satchel. It is dormant and stubborn. Unlike the rapid sprinters of the brassica family, these seeds take their time. 10 days can pass without a single sprout breaking the surface. In the open field, this delay is a vulnerability. Weeds compete for space. Moisture levels fluctuate. The risk of failure increases with every hour the seed remains inactive. On the surface, the soil looks lifeless. But inside, the embryo is slowly assessing the environment. Professional cultivation requires a change in tactics. Do not sow directly into the cold earth. Move the process to a controlled environment. Starting indoors eliminates variables. You are not hoping for favorable weather. You are engineering the climate. Under grow lights, the germination triggers are consistent. In accelerated motion, the soil cracks. The cotyledons emerge. True leaves unfurl in a tight spiral. The root system establishes a grip on the peat pot. When these starts are moved outdoors, they are already sturdy. They skip the fragile infant stage. The transplant shock is minimal. Once the roots tap into the garden soil, the growth curve stabilizes. The metabolism of the plant is steady rather than frantic. It does not bolt immediately. It focuses on biomass accumulation. The maintenance requirement drops to near zero. Water is the 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the biological ceiling for this crop. Peas serve as the primary indicator for the spring cycle, revealing their inherent need for partial shade. Mild solar radiation and cool air drive their metabolic functions, while blazing midsummer heat triggers a system shutdown. This biological constraint makes them the ideal candidate for low-light cultivation zones. They thrive in areas where solar intensity is insufficient for heat-loving varieties. When the season intensifies, the plant slows its cellular division and terminates the life cycle. This is a standard survival response. Why is the seed so large? It carries its own fuel supply. Upon closer inspection, the pea seed is a dense sphere of stored energy ready for rapid deployment. A short soak in water softens the outer casing, followed immediately by direct sowing. The root system presents a logistical vulnerability. It is shallow and fibrous, acting like a delicate net just below the surface. On the surface, the ground appears solid, but inside, the root zone is fragile and prone to rapid dehydration. These roots dry out significantly faster than deep-set crops. Relocation carries high risks. If transplanting is unavoidable, the root ball must remain totally intact to prevent growth stasis. However, direct seeding bypasses this failure point entirely. Water management is the critical variable. The objective is a consistent moisture gradient, avoiding both saturation and drought. In a shaded bed, the evaporation rate is naturally suppressed compared to an open field. But this is not enough. Because the roots function near the surface, they require an external shield. A layer of organic mulch acts as this barrier, regulating soil temperature between irrigation cycles. Then the ascent begins. The plant utilizes sensory tendrils to latch onto vertical infrastructure. In accelerated motion, these green filaments sweep the air, locate a trellis, and coil tight within hours. The connection is strong. Occasionally, gravity wins, and the vine collapses into the aisle. A manual correction is necessary. A simple hook guides the stem back to the support. Once the tendril registers the contact, it secures the hold. The harvest arrives in pulses. Flowers convert to pods in a rapid sequence. Daily inspection is mandatory. The plant's biological goal is seed production. If a pod reaches full maturity, the chemical signal tells the plant to stop growing. It has reproduced. To bypass this, the grower must remove pods constantly. This forces the plant to generate new flowers to ensure survival. The result is a continuous supply of sugar-rich calories from a zone that was previously unproductive. 20 days, that is often all it takes to convert bare soil into edible biomass. Why does this crop often end up in the compost bin? It is not a failure of agriculture, it is a failure of culinary logistics. The root requires specific processing to unlock its potential. Pickling preserves the cellular crunch and sharpens the acidic bite. Roasting applies heat to break down sharp sulfur compounds, rendering the baby roots soft and buttery. Thin slicing integrates raw biomass into fresh mixtures. The problem shifts. It is no longer about consumption. It becomes a demand for higher yield. Biological flexibility is the primary asset here. In full solar exposure, the plant accelerates its life cycle. But there is a risk. Intense heat triggers a panic response. The plant bolts. It stops building the tuber and rushes to produce seeds for survival. The crop is lost. But nature allows for a tactical adjustment. Move cultivation to the shade zones. 2 to 4 hours of direct light is sufficient. In this environment, the metabolic rate slows down. The tuber swells, but it takes its time. Add roughly 14 days to the standard maturity estimates. This delay is calculated. It converts low-light wasteland into productive agricultural space. Instead of a sprint, you get a steady harvest stream. On the surface, the leaves look identical, but underground, the root structure is densifying at a controlled pace. Genetic diversity extends far beyond the standard red sphere found in supermarkets. The green lobo offers a rigid, crisp internal structure. The black Spanish provides a rough, earthy punch. The watermelon radish reveals a striking internal pigment contrast, bright pink against green skin. Benejita adds necessary variance. Then there is the daikon. This is not a small garnish. It is a heavy, substantial root. Pulling it from the clay requires force. It signifies a successful nutrient transfer from soil to storage organ. In fast motion, the white shoulder of the daikon breaches the soil surface, pushing earth aside as it expands in diameter. The planting protocol is stripped back to basics. Transplants destroy the taproot. Direct sowing is mandatory. Seeds are tucked into the substrate. Moisture levels must remain constant to prevent the skin from cracking under pressure. Shade acts as a regulator, mitigating thermal stress and keeping the internal water content high. When the root hits target size, extraction must be immediate. Rising temperatures degrade the cellular walls. The texture becomes pithy. The flavor loses its sharp brightness. Do not wait. This is how you utilize the darkest corners of the field. With a calculated delay, a small, fast crop delivers volume. Minimal light input yields maximum caloric density. Two hours of sunlight, that is the bare minimum required for metabolic activation. Why does this crop retreat to the shadows? Photosynthesis has limits. In full sun, the leaves burn and bolt. In partial shade, they produce biomass. Spinach functions as a biological solar panel designed for low-intensity environments. It thrives in the low temperatures of early spring. It persists as autumn shifts toward the freezing point of winter. High temperatures are a threat to structural integrity. Direct noon radiation triggers a survival response called bolting, turning the crop bitter and fibrous. The canopy of a tree or a north-facing wall provides necessary shielding. The shade acts as a thermal regulator. It keeps the cellular structure tender. It prevents the plant from shutting down due to heat stress. But biology demands a waiting period. The seed hull is dense. Water penetration is slow. Beneath the soil surface, the embryo remains dormant for up to 14 days. This delay is a logistical bottleneck. A seed can sit inert in cold ground while weeds colonize the surface. In fast motion, the soil cracks, and a pale green loop finally pushes upward. Efficiency dictates a change in protocol. Indoor propagation eliminates the variable of outdoor weather. Controlled humidity accelerates the chemical breakdown of the seed coat. Once the root system establishes dominance in the tray, the unit is ready for deployment. The seedlings are tough. They transfer to the shaded sector without shock. This method buys time. It secures a head start against the changing season. On the surface, a static patch of green, but inside, a factory producing iron and vitamins. To maintain output, the grower establishes a conveyor belt system. Do not plant one massive block. Plant small batches in sequence. Intervals of 10 days ensure continuous production. As one row reaches maturity, the next is entering its vegetative peak. This is known as succession planting. It turns a static garden into a rotational production line. The objective is calorie retention. You do not wait for the plant to terminate. You harvest the outer leaves. The center continues to generate new foliage. The leaves are crisp. The stems snap with audible pressure. The flavor is mineral heavy and rich. Drone view. The sun tracks across the sky, leaving the spinach bed in protective shadow for the majority of the day. The soil retains moisture longer without evaporation from direct heat. Roots expand in the damp, cool earth. The metabolic stress is low. Growth is steady. Direct sowing in the bed is possible, but it introduces risk. It tests the timeline. The indoor start remains the most calculated approach. It optimizes the calendar. 2 to 4 hours of direct light is the calculated requirement. The result is a continuous extraction of nutrients from the soil to the plate. The food supply is secured. Zero direct sunlight usually signals crop failure, but the potato tuber operates by different rules. Why utilize the dark corners of the cultivation zone? Most growers see dead space. In reality, it is an untapped production line for carbohydrates. Potatoes are not the first choice for shaded sectors, yet their tolerance for low light is scientifically proven. They do not demand full solar saturation to function. The biological drive to reproduce is absolute. Even in a decomposing compost pile, dormant eyes will wake up. The layers of decaying organic matter provide consistent heat and retained moisture. This acts like a biological battery. The plant does not require blazing heat to trigger initial growth. It pushes green shoots upward, seeking photons in the dimmer spectrum. The substrate does not need to be complex. Standard soil works just as efficiently. In accelerated motion, the stalks elongate slowly but steadily. The leaves turn a deep, matte green to absorb limited light. Finally, the petals unfurl. White or purple flowers emerge from the canopy. This is the critical indicator. On the surface, the plant seems merely decorative, but underground, energy is being rapidly converted into starch. This signals the harvest window. However, the strategy must change. In low light, massive tuber formation takes too long. The energy return on investment drops over time because shade slows the bulking process. The target shifts from volume to speed. Do not wait for full maturity. The goal is new potatoes. The harvester inserts a hand directly into the loose substrate. Fingers locate the small round forms. These young tubers have paper-thin skins. They are dense, waxy, and packed with concentrated flavor. But the process does not end there. The extraction is surgical. Only the largest specimens are removed. The root system remains intact. Soil is pushed back into place to cover the disturbed roots. The factory keeps running. The remaining small tubers continue to swell. This creates a staggered supply chain rather than a single bulk dump. It prioritizes quality and timing over raw tonnage. Maintenance becomes minimal. Direct sun evaporates moisture rapidly, but shade preserves it. The soil stays damp and cool, reducing the need for artificial irrigation. When the blooms appear, the cycle of extraction begins. Even when prime sunlit territory is fully occupied, the food supply expands. The potato secures calories where other crops fail. 4 hours of sunlight. In conventional agronomy, that is usually a recipe for crop failure. But there is an exception to the rule. Why force a sun-loving plant into the shadows? Because arable land is a finite resource. A fast-maturing, cold-tolerant bush tomato can colonize these low-light sectors. The secret lies in the genetic programming. You must select a determinate variety. This plant is not built for endless expansion. It is a biological machine designed for cool starts and rapid completion. It does not waste energy on vegetative sprawl. Instead, it channels resources directly into reproduction. The nomenclature reveals the survival strategy. Look for names like glacier. Identify labels referencing Russia, New York, or Canada. These are not marketing terms. They are data points indicating the plant is comfortable with lower temperatures and a shorter solar window. This is not about achieving industrial-scale tonnage. It is about extracting a viable calorie source from a suboptimal environment. On the surface, the garden bed looks too dark for fruit production, but inside the plant tissues, the metabolism accelerates to beat the frost. Placement becomes a game of efficiency. Visualize the available territory. One zone receives 2 hours of light, another receives 4. The bush tomato demands the 4-hour position. It is a non-negotiable requirement. Assign the deeper shade to crops with broader leaves. Spinach acts as a highly efficient solar panel capable of thriving in the 2-hour sector. The tomato takes the prime spot in this shaded region. That small increase in photon exposure drives the chemical reactions necessary for flower set and ripening. Maintenance is straightforward but critical. Establish the root system early. Maintain consistent soil moisture. In fast motion, the process is distinct. The plant remains compact. It does not vine out. Clusters of green fruit emerge quickly, swelling with water and sugars. You will not see a wall of red produce, but you will secure a harvest that tastes of summer without sacrificing your prime solar real estate. The logic is sound. Do not abandon the shaded zones. Deploy a quick, cool weather determinate variety. It fits the low light brief perfectly. The food supply is expanded. 4 hours of direct light. That is usually a death sentence for a fruiting crop. Why do most heavy feeders fail in the shade? They lack the caloric energy to synthesize sugar for fruit production. But the bush bean operates on a different metabolic budget. While the tomato plant demands full solar exposure to generate its red flesh, the bean is efficient. It adapts. It lowers its photosynthesis threshold and continues to function. The growth rate slows down. The metabolism cools, but the biological directive remains unchanged. Produce seeds. Think of these plants as low-maintenance biological machines. They are compact. They do not vine or sprawl into neighboring territories. They occupy a defined cubic volume of space and deliver a harvest within a predictable window. The logic is purely utilitarian. The grower secures a protein source without sacrificing the prime, sun-drenched acreage required for peppers or corn. Consider the mechanics of a vertical tower system. A column of soil stands upright. One side faces the light. The other faces the dark. In a static setup, the shaded side withers and dies. But the solution is mechanical. Rotate the structure 180 degrees every morning. This simple kinetic action equalizes the energy distribution. The chlorophyll on the shaded side was dormant. Suddenly, it receives a photon blast. It activates. The next day, it rests. Over the course of 30 days, the exposure balances out. Every plant on the tower receives a 50% share of the available radiation. Production stabilizes across the entire vertical surface. The mechanism proves that continuous blazing exposure is not a requirement. It is a luxury. On flat ground, the strategy shifts to spatial alignment. Identify the light gradient. Place the beans on the brighter edge of the bed. Push the leafy greens into the deep shade. This micro-adjustment ensures the beans receive the necessary lux levels for flower initiation. Water management becomes critical here. On the surface, the soil may look dry, but inside, moisture lingers for days. In a shaded environment, the evaporation rate drops drastically. The sun does not strike the earth with enough force to bake out the humidity. This changes the irrigation protocol. Frequent shallow spraying is a mistake. It leads to suffocation. The roots need oxygen. If the soil remains saturated, the root hairs rot. Fungal pathogens attack the stem base. The strategy is precise. Water deeply, then wait. Let the top layer crust over. Let the roots stretch down in search of reserves. Watch the reproductive cycle closely. In fast motion, the white blossom drops. A tiny green protrusion emerges. The pod lengthens, swelling with water and starch. But there is a biological trigger here. The plant wants to mature its seeds to finish its life cycle. If the grower removes the pod early, the plant panics. It senses a failure in reproduction. It forces out new blossoms to compensate. This is the yield multiplier. By harvesting the pods while they are slender and tender, the grower resets the biological clock. One plant produces 3, 4, or 5 flushes of food. A single delay in harvesting signals the plant to shut down. Speed is currency. The bush bean does not need the best spot in the garden. It thrives in the margins. It converts low light zones into productive agricultural space. Minimal input, maximum caloric return. Time to execute the harvest. Classified strictly as a sun-loving crop. That is the common error regarding basil. In the textbooks, it is a solar-dependent organism. craving direct photons to generate oil and biomass. Why force a solar panel into the shade? Because biology is adaptable. Upon closer inspection, the plant changes its strategy. It does not need 12 hours of searing heat to function. In partial shade, the metabolic rate shifts. The plant keeps its cool. Instead of wilting under midday radiation, the leaves remain turgid and hydrated. The focus moves from rapid leaf production to reproductive survival. The plant blooms. This is not a defect. It is a resource. The flower spikes emerge. To the human eye, they are purple and white clusters. To a bee, they are high-contrast landing zones. The shade garden transforms into a refueling station. Pollinators detect the nectar source and descend. Insects land, extract resources, and move to the next node. The area becomes a hub of biological activity. One variety dominates this specific niche, African blue basil. This is not a standard annual. It grows with the aggression of a shrub. It behaves like a perennial mechanism. Cut the stem. The damage triggers an immediate hormonal response. Dormant buds activate. Within days, the plant surges back, denser than before. I have severed the main stalks twice in one season. The result is always the same: explosive, fresh regeneration. It possesses the resilience required when solar energy is limited, but a monoculture is inefficient. Diversity maximizes the space. Visual suggestion. In fast motion, the growth habits diverge. Greek columnar basil shoots upward, forming a rigid green pillar. It does not spread, it climbs. Thai basil adds a chemical variation. Its stems are dark purple, supporting heavy flower clusters that weigh down the branch tips. Pesto perpetuo introduces variegated chlorophyll patterns, lightening the visual density of the bed. Tulsi, the holy basil, adds a distinct scent profile to the mix. Combine these genetics. Suddenly, 50% of the plot is filled with functional foliage. The maintenance protocol is simple. Allow the root systems to anchor into the soil. Then, intervene. Do not fear the harvest. If the plant becomes leggy, seeking light, initiate a hard prune. You are not destroying the crop. You are forcing it to compact itself. The basil rebounds. It settles into a steady rhythm of growth, protected from the scorching sun. On the surface, it looks like a quiet corner, but inside, it is a factory of fragrance and food. The bed delivers color and consistent yields without demanding prime real estate. The mechanism works. The harvest is secured. "70 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the critical threshold. Above this temperature, cilantro triggers a distinct survival protocol. Why does the plant suddenly destroy its own flavor? It believes it is dying. High heat signals the end of the growing season. The organism immediately shifts its energy budget from leaf production to reproduction. This process is known as bolting. A thick, rigid stalk shoots upward. Small white flowers emerge to spread genetic material. The leaves become sparse and bitter. The crop is effectively lost. To prevent this biological panic, you must artificially alter the environment. Move the cultivation zone to the shade. By blocking direct solar radiation, you lower the ambient temperature around the foliage. The soil retains moisture for 40% longer. The root system stays cool. The plant perceives safety. Instead of rushing to produce seeds, it continues to invest energy in vegetative expansion. The development pace slows down. However, the biomass becomes denser and higher in quality. In accelerated motion, the sun tracks across the sky, but the herb bed remains in the shadow. While exposed plants wither and yellow within hours, the shaded leaves remain broad, turgid, and dark green. But that is just one part of the equation. Genetic selection acts as an insurance policy. Strains labeled slow bolt possess a higher heat tolerance. They buy the grower 3 to 4 extra weeks of viability. Combined with light deprivation, this prevents the plant from launching skyward prematurely. On the surface, the patch looks quiet, but inside, the meristems are primed for rapid regeneration. Harvesting is not a passive activity here. It is a mechanical necessity. Do not wait for a perfect visual. Snip the outer stems near the base. This physical damage stimulates the plant to replace the lost tissue. It creates a continuous feedback loop. You extract resources. The plant grows more to survive. A warm spell might cause the foliage to look ragged. A tactical trim resets the growth cycle. Parsley operates on a similar frequency but with higher durability. It is a biennial organism. It naturally resists flowering in its first year. However, intense ultraviolet radiation creates stress. It toughens the cellulose fibers. Under the cover of partial shade, the texture remains crisp and the essential oils remain concentrated. Whether using flat leaf or curly varieties, the biological response is consistent. In this system, you trade velocity for longevity. The plants do not sprint, they endure. Photosynthesis occurs at a measured rate. Instead of a massive surplus followed by a famine, you secure a linear supply chain. The metabolic rate remains steady. If the heat has turned your production into a failure, change the exposure, reduce the light intensity. The growing window extends into the peak of summer. The yield is secured. Zero direct sunlight, that is usually a death sentence for high-yield crops. But for the green onion, it is simply an operational parameter. This specific allium functions as the ideal candidate for low-light zones. Why does this plant succeed where others fail? The answer lies in energy allocation. Standard bulb onions, reds, whites, or shallots are biological batteries. They require 12 to 14 hours of intense solar radiation to store sugars underground. In partial shade, that mechanism fails. The bulb never sizes up. It remains a fibrous, undeveloped knot. The plant starves because it cannot generate enough energy to fill its storage unit. The green onion operates on a different logic. It bypasses the heavy infrastructure of a bulb entirely. Its goal is immediate vegetative expansion. It channels every captured photon directly into the leaves. This efficiency allows it to produce edible biomass, even when the light spectrum is weak. The plant does not wait to hoard energy. It grows vertical tissue immediately. Up close, the difference is structural. The stalks are hollow, cylindrical, and rigid. Cut a cross-section, and the sharp scent of sulfur compounds hits the air instantly. This is concentrated flavor produced without the need for blazing heat. In practical agronomy, the growth rate in the shade will decrease. This is not a failure, it is a shift in tempo. Instead of a massive flush of growth, the bed delivers a steady, predictable trickle. The metabolic rate slows down, spacing out the harvest window. This ensures a consistent supply rather than a single overwhelming yield. There is a logistical advantage here. On the surface, the patch appears static, but inside the soil, the moisture balance is shifting. Shade reduces the rate of evaporation. The earth retains water for longer periods. This means the grower spends less time irrigating. The roots draw from a stable, damp environment. However, caution is required. Because the sun does not dry the soil, waterlogging becomes a risk. The roots need oxygen, not just saturation. Harvesting becomes a calculated, systematic process. Two methods exist. The first is total extraction. Pull the entire unit, process the white base, and replant. The second turns the crop into a renewable factory. Snip only the outer leaves. The central growth point, the meristem, remains intact. Within 48 hours, new green tissue pushes upward from the center. The clump refills itself. In fast motion, the process looks like a fountain. The outer layers are removed, and the core immediately surges to replace the lost mass. This cultivation strategy maximizes land use. Prime, sun-drenched soil is reserved for energy-intensive bulb onions. The green onion colonizes the marginal low-light territories. It requires no special inputs, only moisture and nitrogen. The result is a continuous production line of fresh ingredients. That is how you turn dead space into a functional food source. 75 degrees, that is the biological limit. Beyond this thermal threshold, the internal chemistry of the plant shifts entirely. Fresh flavor is the primary objective. Kale slots efficiently into zones of partial shade, a placement that becomes critical when afternoon temperatures spike. The plant performs best when the ambient heat remains under 75 degrees. In practical agronomy, dappled light, or 3 to 4 hours of direct solar exposure, is sufficient for photosynthesis. This is a calculation of energy versus stress. The crop seeks the brighter end of this spectrum for momentum, but requires protection to keep the cellular structure tender and growth consistent. Why does the shade matter? In full sun, the plant activates defense mechanisms that toughen the leaves. In partial shadow, it remains in a vegetative state. Treat this organism as the cool season staple it is. The biological schedule is rigid. For a spring cycle, transplantation occurs 4 to 5 weeks before the final frost. In autumn, sowing resumes as the heat intensity fades. The genetics are genuinely cold hardy. Young tissues can withstand a light freeze without rupturing. Therefore, the shoulder seasons, those transitional weeks between extremes, are the prime window for biomass production. Space is a resource. Plants must be positioned 8 to 12 inches apart. Between rows, the gap widens to 18 or 24 inches. This is not for aesthetics. It is a sanitary measure. In accelerated motion, the canopy expands, filling the void without overlapping. Proper distance creates a wind tunnel effect, reducing pest pressure and ensuring airflow keeps the foliage dry. If the goal is baby leaf salads, harvesting begins in 25 to 30 days. For full industrial maturity, the cycle extends to 55 or 75 days, depending on the specific variety. Hydration and substrate composition are straightforward, but non-negotiable. The root system demands consistent moisture and fertile, well-drained soil. In warmer periods, the shade prevents the plant from producing stress-induced bitter compounds. The result is superior texture without forcing the biological engine. Soil should remain evenly moist, never saturated. Mulch acts as a thermal insulator, smoothing out the volatility between irrigation cycles. Mistakes were not an option. 2 common errors frequently derail the yield. First, planting during the thermal peak of summer forces rapid, tough growth. The leaves become fibrous and bitter. Success lies in the spring and fall windows, leaning on afternoon shade when warm weather lingers. Second, density oversight. When seedlings crowd each other, stems elongate in a desperate reach for light. This condition is known as legginess. Thinning must happen early. It is better to sacrifice a few weak units than to compromise the entire bed. Extraction is continuous and forgiving. The grower harvests the outer leaves as needed. On the surface, the plant appears diminished, but inside the central rosette, new growth continues to push upward. This method extends the productive lifespan of the crop. If a light frost strikes the field, panic is unnecessary. The drop in temperature triggers a chemical reaction where starches convert into sugars, acting as a natural antifreeze. The harvest becomes sweeter. Post-harvest logistics are minimal. Rinse the biomass, remove excess water via centrifugal force, and refrigerate. The leaves hold their structure well in the short term, allowing for a heavy harvest that sustains consumption throughout the week. In a shaded plot, kale operates as a reliable biological anchor, productive over a long duration when provided with space, steady moisture, and sensible management. "3 hours of light. That is all this biological machine requires to function. Why does this crop survive where others fail? It possesses a highly efficient photosynthetic mechanism. While light-sensitive crops wither in the shadows, mint activates its metabolic processes even with minimal solar input. It creates a strategic advantage for the grower. This adaptability turns dead zones into productive territory. Shady corners, fence lines, and the northern edges of beds become viable agricultural space rather than wasted dirt. The plant is a hardy perennial. This means the initial investment of labor pays off repeatedly. The root system goes dormant in winter and reactivates in spring without human intervention. In practical agronomy, this reliability transforms a difficult plot into a permanent resource extraction point. Spacing is a calculated decision. Set the plants 18 inches apart. This distance allows the individual units to expand and knit together into a dense, continuous canopy. This creates a living solar panel that maximizes the limited light. Once the biomass is established, the grower initiates the harvest cycle. You do not just pick leaves, you shear the stems. The plant responds to this stress by surging with new growth. On the surface, it appears to be a simple, fragrant herb. But underground, the root system is a relentless mechanism of expansion. The rhizomes do not stay put. They tunnel horizontally through the clay, seeking new territory to colonize. This leads to the first critical error in cultivation: unrestricted planting. If placed in open ground without a perimeter, the crop becomes invasive. It will overtake adjacent vegetables and choke out weaker species. The solution is physical containment. Growers utilize rigid containers, window boxes, or sunken barriers to corral the biological expansion. The roots hit the wall and are forced to grow densely rather than broadly. But that was just the beginning of the management strategy. Water regulation is the second variable. The soil composition must remain rich and moisture retentive. However, saturation is fatal. The roots require oxygen as much as water. Stagnant liquid creates an anaerobic environment that breeds rot and fungal pathogens. If the collection saucer remains full, the plant suffocates. Upon closer inspection, the signs of health are visible. The stems stand rigid. The leaves are a deep, saturated green. Good drainage acts as the primary defense system against disease. The goal is a moist equilibrium, not a swamp. Harvesting follows a strict biological clock. Sever the stems just before the flowering phase begins. At this stage, the concentration of essential oils peaks in the leaves. If flower buds appear, the chemical profile changes and the flavor degrades. A quick mechanical trim resets the vegetative cycle. In fast motion, the cut stems seal and push out new laterals within 48 hours. The canopy regenerates rapidly, preparing for the next round of extraction. Post-harvest logistics determine the shelf life. For short-term holding, the biomass is wrapped in damp cellulose and placed in cold storage. This maintains turgidity for several days. For long-term reserves, the strategy shifts to dehydration or freezing. Leaves are dried in ventilated areas or frozen whole to lock the aroma inside the cellular structure. In a shade-heavy cultivation plan, this species performs multiple duties. It serves as a high-yield culinary resource, a dense ground cover, and a low-maintenance anchor for the garden bed. With limited light and strict boundaries, it delivers continuous output. One plant provides enough material for tea, sauces, and salads for months. The harvest helps secure the food supply. One single head of cauliflower represents months of biological investment. Why hide a plant from the sun? It seems counterintuitive to block the primary energy source. But for this species, direct solar radiation is often destructive. High heat triggers a panic response. The curds separate. The texture becomes grainy. The flavor turns bitter. In the cool sector of the plot, the plant regulates its internal temperature. It does not need full exposure, it needs stability. Up close, the white florets are tightly packed. They form a dense fractal pattern. The goal is to prevent chlorophyll production in the head. We need the tissue to remain white and distinct. In a shaded environment, the development is slower but chemically superior. The plant focuses on structural integrity rather than rapid expansion. But light is only half the equation. Nutrient delivery must be constant. Fluctuations cause structural failure. The root system acts as a pump, maintaining internal pressure. If the water supply cuts out, the plant stresses. If the fertilizer spikes, the growth becomes uneven. The soil here functions as a buffer. It holds moisture and feeds the roots at a steady, measured drip. The result is a dense, heavy sphere. Pure biomass. It is solid to the touch. Brussels sprouts require a different strategic approach. This is a long-term operation. While radishes cycle in 30 days, this crop occupies the ground for nearly half the year. It is an exercise in endurance. From the outside, the growth seems stalled, but internally, the stalk is fortifying its structure to support weight. The plant constructs a vertical tower. The main stem thickens like lumber. Leaves fan out to capture diffused photons in the partial shade. This lower light intensity is critical. It keeps the internal temperature down during the peak of summer. If the heat rises too high, the sprouts degrade. They become loose and leafy. The density is lost. By reducing solar intake, the buds remain tight spheres. They clamp firmly against the fibrous stem. Then comes the physiological shift. The season changes. The air temperature drops. In fast motion, the large fan leaves yellow and fall, revealing the column of green nodes. Mistakes were not an option during the growing phase. Now, the cold weather activates a survival mechanism. The plant converts stored starches into sugars. This acts as a natural antifreeze. The cell walls harden. The flavor profile shifts from bitter to sweet. This is not just a vegetable. It is a calorie reserve. The harvest is secured for the coldest months. Three hours of direct light, that is often considered a death sentence for a productive garden, but biology finds a way. Short-root carrot varieties do not fight the lack of depth, they adapt to it. Instead of driving a long taproot into cold, compacted subsoil, these plants execute a different tactical maneuver. They swell outward. The root remains spherical, compact, and dense. It turns a low-energy zone into a manufacturing unit for sugar and starch. Why force a plant to drill deep when resources are scarce? It is an energetic waste. These compact varieties focus on immediate storage. On the surface, you see only a small cluster of green fronds. But inside the soil, the cooling effect of the shade preserves the chemical balance. The lower temperature prevents the sugars from degrading. The result is a texture that snaps under pressure and a flavor profile that lacks bitterness. This biological efficiency allows for high-density planting. Containers, fabric grow bags, and shallow raised beds become viable production sites. In fast motion, the foliage spreads low to capture scattered photons, while the orange sphere expands rapidly beneath the surface. Extraction is simple. The root dislodges from the earth without resistance. It is clean, round, and bright. This proves a critical logistical point. You do not need full solar exposure to secure a harvest. The strategy shifts with the next crop. Turnips occupy the shaded sector with a different physiological approach. They rely on steady, calm growth. Under a canopy of partial shade, the plant's metabolism slows down. This is not a defect. It is a feature. The reduced rate of photosynthesis keeps the cellular structure of the leaves tender. They do not turn tough or fibrous. Simultaneously, the root creates a pale, smooth bulb. The pace is slow, but the accumulation of biomass is constant. Upon closer inspection, the dual utility becomes clear. This is a survival asset. The root provides carbohydrates for soups and roasting. The leaves provide immediate greens. One plant yields two distinct food sources. It requires only consistent moisture and a small footprint of earth. There is no need for complex chemical inputs. The plant simply converts a dark, underutilized patch of land into a reliable, functional food reserve.